Then I want to welcome everybody to Henderson Speaks. It's sort of nice to see everybody back indoors, in a room. It's kind of an interesting idea, isn't it? We haven't been doing that for a little while. It's kind of fun to be back here. In case you haven't heard, I've retired. I am no longer the administrator of the Clark County Museum System. I am the former administrator of the Clark County Museum System. But as you can tell, the Henderson Historical Society hasn't let go of me yet. So, well, thank you. So I am here as your MC tonight, but I'm not going to be the one doing all the speaking. Oh no, I haven't been here quite as long as our panelists here. I've only been here since 1993. I am a newcomer. I am going to introduce our panelists. We have a long list of subjects that they are going to be speaking on tonight. These are various businesses and buildings that have figured in the history of Henderson. So what we're going to do tonight is I am going to go through, ask them about a business or a building, and let them all speak to that, and then move on to the next one. After we've gotten through that list, then I will open it up to questions from the audience. Please let us go through this way and hold your questions till the end. Make some notes to yourself, whatever you need to do, but in that way we'll be able to get through the list. It's a long list, but any of you that have been here will know these buildings, will know these businesses. These will elicit a lot of memories for all of you. It's going to be a wonderful time, I'm sure, because even I remember a number of these businesses. Even I was in a number of these businesses. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. So let me run through our panel here. And I'm sorry, is it Otta?
Otta Ray.
Otta Ray. See, I try to get it right,
You're
but thank you. Otta Ray Morrison has been a Henderson resident since 1951. She began high school at Basic High School when it was located in the town site at Water and Atlantic before graduating from the second BHS after it was relocated to the brand new school constructed near Pacific and Van Wagenen. I am glad that you started at the first one because that's where the museum also started. I appreciate that. Ms. Morrison was also crowned Miss Industrial Days in 1954, worked at the Victory Theater as, it didn't print.
Selling the popcorn.
Selling the popcorn, thank you. Something didn't print out on my paper. Don't you love computers?
You know what, I think I might be able to...
No, never mind. It's just, I don't know why, but they love us until they hate us, right? Well, Otta Ray, you had the longest intro, so is that enough?
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I don't have them all in order here. So I'm going to come back to Sean. He comes in at the end. Let's see. We have Clyde Caldwell. He's former director of the Henderson Boys and Girls Club. Began his career in recreation supervision and management at the city's first youth center. He has been a Henderson resident since the 1960s. Then we have Jim Cameron. He's married to Patty, nearly 30 years. Moved to Henderson in 1955 when he was almost 8.
2 days away from my 8th birthday.
There you go. He graduated from Henderson High School in 1965.
Basic high school.
Basic high school.
On Van Wagner.
Sean,
Did I put Henderson?
yes,
High
you
School?
did.
Oh, my goodness. See what happens when you're in a rush?
Yes, I noticed this.
See that?
Okay, he worked for TIMET from 1965 to 73, then was out of state in the construction industry, and then came back to TIMET in 1996, and is still there as a lab technician.
Yes.
Yes, very good. And then we have, let's see, Chris Carroll on the end, retired Las Vegas Metro Police Department officer. As a youth, he worked at both of Henderson's well-remembered Swanky Club and Nick's Supper Club, though the Supper Club, and what, was it the Supper Club? No, where was it that you were at in junior high?
Oh, junior high, I worked at the Gold Mine Club.
At the Gold Mine
Prior
Club.
to child labor laws.
Yes. May not have been something that would have been allowed today, but was allowed at the time. Some of you might remember that at that point in time, we didn't quite hew to those child working laws as much as we do today. And then we have Sean DeFrank, who's a local businessman, journalist, and an Henderson Historical Society director, who isn't always accurate in what he sends to me. But,
Fair enough.
but that's our panel for tonight. And since it somehow fits, you saw all the photographs, I hope, and looked at them in the lobby. You'll recognize a number of these. The first one that we're going to talk about is the original basic high school, 1943 to 53. The facility later served as the Henderson Elementary and Junior High School, the City of Henderson Civic Center, Clark County Community College, and near and dear to my heart, the Clark County Museum during parts of the 1950s to the 1980s. And I think we'll start here with you, Ray, if you want to say any memories that you have of it.
Absolutely. When I first moved to Henderson, it was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. The high school was at the old buildings on Water Street. It was a wonderful experience. We had the buildings lined up. You just went in your classroom and then came out and played on the lawn or talked and shared autographs and stories. We were the first class to go up to the new Burkholder High School. And the day we moved to this high school, I'll never forget, it was a wonderful experience. The Clark County School District, the fire department, and the police department all worked together on making a plan to get us all up there safely. The plan was on Monday morning, you cleared out your locker, you took your books, you lined up with your class. The fire truck went first, making a path for us to go. Each class followed, carrying their books. We had two parole cars in Henderson at that particular time, and they wove in and out, making sure that nobody got hurt, that everyone was obeying the kids crossing, and we all walked up to the school for the first time, and it was just wonderful. And then my class, which was 1954, we were the first class to graduate from there. And it was a wonderful school, a wonderful camaraderie. The town, the people was just so supportive of having this wonderful new school. It was a real pleasure.
Was there anything particular about the old buildings that you remember?
Oh, yes. It was real fun because in between classes, you could go out and sit on the lawn and talk with all your friends. And it was, I remember the home ec class, they didn't have room for that particular class, so it was I don't know if anyone remembers, but the Gandard family in Henderson had quite a large family, and they lived up on 10th Street, and the house right next to them was the home ec class. So when it came time to go to home ec, you crossed the football field, went up to the little house on 10th Street and had your class, came right back, never had any problems, and the school support was wonderful. The whole town showed up for every football game and every basketball game. And it was just a wonderful community and a good experience for me. You're up.
Okay. Take your pick. Let's just go down the line.
See anything?
But I got here in 66, so
You weren't there.
I'm way behind.
Oh, Clyde, didn't you have a story about when it was the Civic Center and about doing chariot races on the old track around the old football field?
We did. When I ran the youth center, we made these chariots and got tires, bicycle tires and stuff. We made chariots, and I got in trouble, almost fired for stealing all the garbage cans from the Civic Center for the baskets for the chariots and everything. So, but we have the record for the tallest snowman ever built on Civic Center property, 15 feet actually. We challenged everybody else in the valley, but it doesn't snow very often, so I don't see that record being broken very soon. But the Civic Center was a great place when I worked at the youth center. The Civic Center field was where we did everything. So as a youth activities director, we had all our flag football games at the Civic Center field. And on Mondays, I would go to McCall Elementary, and from 3 to 4, I would coach the 3rd and 4th graders. From 4 to 5, I would coach 5th and 6th graders. On Tuesday, I would go to Taylor and do the same thing. And on Wednesday, I would go to Sewell and do the same thing. And on Thursday, I would lime the fields. On Saturday, we'd pick them up in that white bus you used to see drive around all the time, pick up all the kids. I coached every team. I lined the fields. I was the official, and nobody complained. So, you know, who are they going to complain to anyway? But what a great time in Old Henderson when I got here in 66 in the Civic Center field and everything. One time on the field, the staff at the youth center decided to build a pyramid, and we got it about halfway up and it collapsed. It was about 30 feet tall, and it collapsed, almost killed a couple kids. Missed them, didn't hurt them or anything, so we were lucky. So, but that's what I remember about the Civic Center.
When I first came here, I went to Park Village, was a brand new school, and that was later Taylor that he was referring to. But in 6th grade, I went to Townside Elementary up on the hill. And I remember that year when they had the big smallpox campaign. We all had to march out on the field, on the football field, and line up. And that doctor be with you doing this thing. Everybody walked around with that little scar on their arm, the smallpox vaccinations. And back then, nobody had a choice. You got it. It's not like today. And I remember going to basic high school, and I graduated in 65. And also, when I was earlier going to the junior high school and Townside, Lyle W. Burkholder was the superintendent of the Henderson School District. And his wife, Marion, was a music teacher at the elementary school. And if I'm not mistaken, the Henderson School District was not a part of the Clark County School District. Those two were separate entities.
The school districts weren't merged until 1956.
Right.
That's when the state law changed.
Because I remember in front of the junior high school was this one lone town site looking square building, and that's where Mr. Burkholder's office was. He was the superintendent of the school district, Henderson School District. And I remember graduating in 65, we all took a senior class trip to Disneyland, and that was a lot of fun. So that's all I got for now.
You know, getting back to the youth center, I got here in Henderson, and my family got here in the 70s when I was a kid. And at that time, the old basic high school was the Civic Center then. And at that time, to me, it seemed kind of like the heart of Henderson. If there was something going on, it was at the Civic Center, whether it was revolving industrial days or in the fall, they used to have, in the 70s and in the 80s, I'm not sure how long it went on, the Henderson Expo, where a lot of the businesses all had booths and stuff in what would have been the old gym at the original Basic. I mean, there was just a lot of activity at that time. Classes were still offered there, community classes. I took a guitar class there, I think, when I was, 12 years old or so. Used to go there on Saturday mornings and Saturday afternoons. They would show movies in the old auditorium, and everybody would sit down on the floor. And I remember watching the old Sinbad movie there, and the movie Willard with all the rats. I remember watching that there as a kid. So, just, that was such a great time. The Civic Center was just, it seemed like it, if something was going on in Henderson, it was going on at the Civic Center.
I got one more thing. I was 8 years old when we came down here, and I was staying with my grandparents on Victory Road. And back in them days, there wasn't much to do. But you got like 50 cents. We walked barefoot a lot of times on the sidewalks in the summer up to the pool, which is part of the youth center up there. And you could go swimming all day long for 15 cents. And later on, we'd be down to Victory Theater, and you'd get in there for 20 cents, watch a matinee and 3 or 4 cartoons. And
We'll be to the Victory Theater.
Oh, okay.
We'll be getting there. And Chris?
It's before me.
Okay. I will add one little piece to this one, because that's where the museum did start. And we got in there in 1968. That's when the what is now the Clark County Museum started. Started as the Southern Nevada Museum there. And was interesting because it was condemned at that point.
Yeah.
But of course, what do you do with a condemned museum? Well, you put a public museum in it, a condemned building. So we got the museum in there. It was a private museum, private nonprofit. Was started by the Henderson Chamber of Commerce. Was the only museum in the Vegas Valley at that point. The city of Henderson knew that they were going to be using that property eventually, so they really wanted the museum to eventually move out. They gave the museum the property that's out on Boulder Highway where the museum is today in 1970, with a 5-year time span that the museum had to build a building out there or get a building out there. In late 1974, so within that 5-year time span, the museum was able to get the Union Pacific Depot from Boulder City, which Union Pacific wanted to give it away. Nobody in Boulder City would take it that was a nonprofit. They would only give it to a nonprofit, and nobody in Boulder City would take it. So the nonprofit that at that point was running the museum said, well, if we can move it, will you give it to us? And they said, yep, we just want it gone. And so they got it moved to the property there on Boulder Highway, but they didn't have enough money to restore it and move into it, so they had a big celebration in it and then closed the doors and even left all the trash inside and went back downtown and kept working out of the old school building until 1979, when the city said, we're tearing this building down, so you have to move. So that's when the museum finally moved out of there.
Yeah.
And that's when it finally went away. So I know about the last few years of it. I wasn't here, but I know the history of it. So hold on to any of your questions about that one. Now we're getting to the Victory Theater. Monterey?
I worked at the Victory Theater from day one of coming to Henderson. I don't know how many people here could possibly remember Van Wagenen, but oh great, he was a wonderful human being, and he ran the theater. And he only hired kids, the high school kids, that he really felt like the families could use the money. If there was 2 kids up for selling the popcorn, for instance, and one come from a little more affluent family than the other one, he would ask us kids, and we'd tell him, she's got 4 brothers and sisters, and she'd really profit from this job. That was the young girl that got the job. And he was so great with those kids. He loved teenagers. He took such good care of us kids on a big football night. I'll never forget one night in particular. It was a big playoff game with Reno. And I personally just wanted to be in the crowd. I wasn't real interested in the football game in itself. So all of the other kids, of course, really wanted to. And little Jim Potter and I ran the theater that night so that everybody else could go to the game. He went out and took the tickets. I ran in, made the popcorn. We ran out and turned the lights on. We went back and forth all night long. But that's the kind of person that Van Wagenen was. He was a good, kind soul that genuinely loved the kids. And through the years, I remember the first, this is kind of skipping, but the first year of the Mist Industrial Days contest, one of the plants gave to the city, or loaned to the city, a flatbed truck so that the girls could walk up the steps, go across the plank, or the flatbed truck. And Van Wagenen, when that was over, he said, never again. The Victory Theater will always be available for any events that will help and benefit the city. So I remember my time as a good time there, but I also remember a very good man.
You're probably the only one.
Where was that exactly, the Victory Theater?
It's on Army Street.
In back of what's now the Rainbow Club?
No,
It's where the Emerald Island Casino is.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh, no? Is that wrong?
It is bounded by Army, Panama, and Navy. It would have been in the south side of what is now the Emerald Island parking lot. Which abuts Army Street, so it would be between, you have the building proper, and then there's an alley, and then there's the parking lot, so it would have been,
right behind the Rexall drugstore.
yes, precisely, behind the town site.
Okay. Jim? You said you had a story?
Memories of the Victory Theater?
I remember going to the Victory Theater. It was 20 cents. You got to go in and see a matinee, half dozen cartoons, and a cereal. A lot of people don't know what a cereal is, but it'd be like Flash Gordon or something.
Every Saturday.
And every week the episode continued. And then if you wanted to stay, you could see the 2 afternoon features, evening features. That wasn't a bad deal, but for my 50 cents, the popcorn was a dime, came in a box, and the Coke was a dime, but it was a small Coke, so I didn't buy one there. I waited till I got out and I could go to the Polar Queen and get a large one for a dime.
We were on to you.
And I remember there was a guy there, they called him Uncle Earl. And around the holidays, he'd have these big Christmas things for the kids. I mean, he had bicycles and everything else. He had giveaways. And every week he had some kind of a giveaway. And you kept your ticket stub. And the one time I got drawn, and you had a choice of 2 things. He drew 2 people. And I got the first choice, so I had a choice of bringing 6 friends the following week and a popcorn and a soda for each one of them to the movie. Or I could get a 24-count box of Sugar Daddies. Well, I took the 6, I'm going to take 6 friends. Man, the friends come out of the woodwork. And then about 6 months later, my younger brother won that once, but he got the second choice, and he wound up with the Sugar Daddies. But I helped him out with it.
Do you know what year the Victory closed?
I don't.
I couldn't find that either. I tried to look up when the Victory Theater closed, but I couldn't
I
find
can't
any
remember.
reference.
I couldn't tell you offhand. Any other comments on the Victory Theater? Okay, we'll move on to the Henderson Youth Center. I think we may have somebody who can speak to that.
Well,
Not I.
Well, let's see, I moved here in '66, and the youth center was one of the first places I went to. And Pappy Swift Everybody remember Pappy Swift? The pool tables and snooker tables there, they were his babies, man. He took, if you messed up on the snooker table or pool table, you were out, So wiffle ball and snooker was the thing to play at the youth center there. And then after I graduated and I came back from the service and stuff, I worked there from 75 to 80. And funnest time I ever had in my life. How I got the job was pretty crazy. The government at the time, a lot of veterans were coming home and everything, so the government gave the city some money for grants to hire people. And my interview, my wife looked in the home news, and they said they were hiring a youth activities director at the city of Henderson. And she goes, "You need to apply for that," because I was insulating houses at the time, and I didn't like that. But so I went in for an interview with Willie Davison. Some of you remember Willie. And I remember he played football a year or two before us. And I remember watching the films of Willie Davison playing. And he was interviewing him, and I go, "Hey, didn't you play for Western High School?" And he says, "Yeah." And I go, "Man, I remember watching the films of you, man. I'm so glad you graduated before we played you and everything." He goes, "You're hired." And so that's how I never had any experience doing anything in recreation at all. And that's how I got my job, man. Willie loved that story, and I got that job that day, man. So ran it from 75 to 80. Some of the best times I ever had running the youth center. Almost got fired for painting lines on the red brick wall at the youth center and putting up home run and double and triple and everything for wiffle ball and everything, and got called into Dundee Jones' office and said he could fire me for that, for not getting permission, but he let it go after that and everything. So, but what a great time there. And we played wiffle ball. We had like 15 wiffle ball teams in a league there. And I always tell people when Ray Crunk and Anson Jones and all those guys won the state championship in baseball, I told everybody it's because they played wiffle ball at the youth center. And I think it had a lot to do with it. So, but some great times, and I left there in 80 to go to the Boys and Girls Club. But what a fantastic time at the youth center was, really was. And it's being a small town and everything, that everybody in downtown Henderson, that's where they went, was to the youth center. And and then across the highway, a lot of the kids were going to the Boys and Girls Club, Boys Club at the time. So, but that's what I remember at the youth center. Some super times there.
Actually found in a, just kind of snooping around in old issues of the Henderson Home News online, and found recently an issue from March 1954. It was an article about the fund drive to build the youth center. They had a fundraising event at the Silver Slipper on the Strip, and they needed, it's the dollar amount's hilarious, they needed $60,000 to build the youth center at the time. and at the initial fundraiser, $5,000 was raised that night. So wow. Yeah, $60,000 to build the youth center.
Wow.
I was one of the main people that did not want the youth center torn down. And they said it was because of the asbestos in there, but I don't know. But so I argued with the city a lot. It says, you can't, you're tearing down all the historical stuff in Henderson, you got to leave this up, you got to leave this up. And so what they did is they took a little piece of the floor and some of the bricks, and they put in the Parks and Recreation building now, so when you go in, you can kind of see a little bit of the history. But the BMI pool in the youth center was the place to go. I mean, that was a happening place. So
yeah.
I lost.
Yeah, I was one of those kids that was in Clyde's wiffle ball leagues at the youth center, and I could tell you that, like that tape on the walls lining out the home runs and for the wiffle ball field. I mean, that was kind of like, for those of us who grew up in Henderson, that was almost like an iconic thing, seeing those, that tape on the walls. But I could say, just to speak to Clyde, about himself directly, I could tell you that, you know, probably more than one generation of young people growing up in Henderson, mostly boys, but girls too. There's a lot of young people in this town that grew up in the 70s and 80s and even beyond that owe Clyde a big debt of gratitude, because he did create a lot of events to keep kids entertained, and he always made it fun.
It's funny because when I first came to Henderson, I met David English and Sid Pickard, and they were telling me about the youth center dances, you know. And so first week or two we went up there. I don't know if any of you remember, they went there. One night they had a pickup truck from the police department with a cage in the back of it. And they backed it up into the, right by the door at the dance. And anybody they caught drinking that was drunk, they threw in that cage for 2 or 3 hours. And coming from San Diego, first thing I thought was, well, that's different, you know? It always made you think about going to the youth center dance, you know, being drunk. Are they going to have that cage there, you know? So it was kind of a crazy thing. I don't think they get away with that today. So, but that's kind of the way it was there, man. They, you know, it was different back then. But to see a pickup truck with a cage in it and a couple guys in there drunk, you know, when you go into the dance, you're like, oh, okay, that's a warning, you know? So, pretty interesting.
Yeah, Clyde's right. That was the go-to place in Henderson for all us kids, because there was no other avenue for us, you know? I mean, we either went out in the desert and made our own entertainment. You took a backpack and a can of corn and some hot dogs and a BB gun and went out there in the desert.
No beer, though, right?
No beer. And then, but the youth center and the swimming pool was kind of like the nerve center of Henderson. And I remember going in there with Pappy Swift, and I was only like 9 years old, and I wanted to play pool so bad. And he come over with that pool stick, set it on the ground. If you weren't taller than that pool stick, you didn't get to play. You had to wait till you grew up taller than the pool cue. And then in high school, I remember a lot of great fun with dances and stuff, and they had live bands. I mean, it was really great. Had a great time.
Okay. Well, let's see. What have we got next? Probably a few people have heard of this and maybe remember it. How about the Rainbow Club movie theater? Started far end?
It's funny when that Rainbow movie theater went in, that was a big thing for the kids. Everybody wanted to go to the Rainbow movie theater. And I remember we'd take a bunch of kids from the boys club, and I'd sit way in the back, and every time kids from the club would start messing up, I'd go tap them on the shoulder, make them come set up with us and everything, you know. But that's just the way it was, you know, back then. My daughter and them talked about that all the time, to go into the Rainbow. It's pretty cool, probably about the size of this here, right? I would say, yeah. Pretty intimate, so.
Not quite that big.
Yeah, maybe not, yeah. So, but the Rainbow Theater, that was a good place to go.
Well, I used to go to movies there pretty regular, and I remember two of them that I remember well were the Rocky 1 and Saturday Night Fever. So those were two biggies. But more important than that, I had my first kiss in the Rainbow movie theater.
We won't ask with who. That's all right. So what was the theater like? I mean, in comparison to what we had these days?
Yeah, real small.
It was you could tell it was thrown together as an afterthought, you know. It was never designed to be a theater. I think they just a little general carpentry and a little bit more than a white wall in the front. Yeah. And then when you left, you went down the fire escape out the back and down the stairs, and the stairs are still there. I drove by them the other day and looked at it, then went, oh, yeah. It's all coming back to me.
Yeah, the stairs are still there. When you walk in the main entrance of the Rainbow, there's a little tight staircase going up the right side, and that's the old staircase that went to the movie theater. And the old ticket window for the movie theater is actually still up there, and I think it's basically like part of the kind of administrative offices for the Rainbow now, but the actual ticket window still exists. I'm not sure whatever became of the space that the movie theater was in. But it was such a huge thing for all of us who lived there, and especially as a kid, because I mean, it wasn't like now where there's parks on, every other corner with water features and water slides and pools everywhere. And, like Jim was saying, to make your fun most of the time, you just went out in the desert and made bike tracks and such. So to get a movie theater here at the time was so huge, and that was such an iconic time for movies. Like I remember when Jaws came there, and it was, people lined up around the outside of the movie theater, around the outside of the Rainbow, and when Star Wars came, I think Star Wars, God, it must have played for at least a week, if not 2 weeks, and every showing, there were people lined up around the Rainbow, and I probably ended up seeing it, 5 times just at the Rainbow Club while it was playing there. And truth be told, me and a friend, Jim Moyes, we were in line, and we had every intention on buying our tickets and going in, and it just so happened that we were behind a mother who, I don't know if they were all her kids, but she had many kids with her, and so when they were walking in, we just decided to kind of blend in with them. I will say also, the scariest movie I ever saw in my life, as far as the age I was at the time, I saw at the Rainbow. I was probably, and who knows why my dad made the decision to take me and my friends to this movie, but he took us to see It's Alive, and we were probably like 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old, and I don't think I slept a full night's sleep for about 6 months after that.
So am I understanding that the theater wasn't ADA accessible?
No.
Okay. Okay, next on the list is Carver Park.
I remember Carver Park fondly. I lived there. It was my first apartment. In fact, was in Carver Park. I think half of Henderson started out in Carver Park or Victory Village. But one of the nicest things about Carver Park was that's where they had that little recreation center, and when I was a teenager, they had dances there, and it was nice. It was a nice, cheap place to live, and they had the dances there when I was a teenager there in Victory Village. That's about all I remember about it, but it was nice. It was a good place to be.
I lived there 3 times. We moved down here in 55. We lived in Carver Park, Tennessee, East Washington. We was there about 6 months, and my parents bought a house in Vegas for about 1.5 years. Then they both lost their jobs at Time Met, and they rented the house out and moved back to Carver Park, 11C, Washington.
It was the only place you could rent in Henderson.
Oh, yeah. And
Victory Village.
but they had a little grocery store down there, Carver Park Market. Harold Ream and Royal Ream and Harold Garish owned it. Later on, Harold broke away and started Tops Market. But they used to have a little ice cream place over there. And you go over there and get like a cold drink or an ice cream or something
There was a
at the
little
window.
market in there too for a while.
Oh, what?
A little market,
Yeah, well, that's,
Yeah,
yeah, a little
grocery
Carver
store.
Park Market.
had a little grocery store and a beauty shop.
Right, because we used to go get all the pop bottles and take them down that store and get 3 cents a bottle for them, and then go to the penny candy and get all we wanted. And then Victory Village, I lived there twice. Oh, you're talking about just Carver Park.
Yep.
Okay. But Carver Park, I remember one time when I was about, 9 or 10. Man, I was blowing and going on this bicycle, hell bent for leather. and I was looking the other way. Bam! I ran into the back of a cop car. He was stopped right. Man, I slid across that trunk. And he got out to make sure I was all right. It bent the forks on the wall back. Had a lot of fun in Carver Park.
Yep, and there's one building left from Carver Park that's still standing.
Yeah,
Yep, that's the Elks Lodge.
the Elks Lodge.
Yep,
Yep.
that is the one building from Carver Park that still stands.
Well, we was in a two-bedroom apartment, and there was me and two other brothers. So in the one bedroom, we had bunk beds on one side and a twin bed on the other side. And those rooms were small,
Yeah.
very small. And you had one swamp cooler for two apartments. The swamp cooler was a downdraft, and it went into this duct, and it went into both apartments. Well, if the other guy had his switch on, and you was getting cold, the only way you could control it was they had these big slides. You could cut off the vent or cut it down some. Otherwise, you were stuck because he had his power onto it.
Interesting. Okay. Any other memories?
Can't think of it. Except my bike got stole there once. Brand new Schwinn bike.
No lock, right?
Oh,
Okay. One that I remember when I first got here, though it wasn't open any longer. How about Old Vegas?
that was a fun place.
That was a fun place.
Who wants to start?
I'll chime in with some of the nuts and bolts of it if I... Okay, so for those who don't remember it, it was an Old West themed amusement park located on Boulder Highway. It was 124 acres. There was a statue of a man on a horse in front of it. The man was Rafael Rivera, who was a Mexican scout, believed to be the first non-Native American to set foot in the Las Vegas Valley. So there was a statue of him on a horse in front of it, and it was a big old fort. It was approved by the Henderson City Council in '75. Construction started in '77. The park opened in November '78. The second phase was constructed in 1980. The park closed in 1986 for remodeling, but never reopened. And then it was demolished altogether in 1997. So that's kind of the...
If I'm not mistaken, I believe Old Vegas was owned by the same people that owned Old Tucson.
Well, it was,
The movie set down in Tucson,
yeah, it was
Arizona.
based on that. Yep.
Yes, and, I mean, they had what was that barbecue place?
Ruth's Chris.
Tony Romo.
Tony Roma's.
Tony Romas
Yeah.
was in there and Ruth's Chris was in there.
Tony Roma's was in there. They used to have gunfights, and
Yep.
had a train that ran around the place, but the greatest thing was they used to have the KFM 102 parties out there on the weekends. One of the local country radio stations. And they'd have huge parties out there on the weekend. That was great.
Or they had go-karts there too,
Yeah.
and race go-karts.
Yeah.
Really?
Did that a few times.
Inside or?
It was outside. It was an outdoor track.
Right.
Oh, was it?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
but it was inside the fort complex.
But yeah, it was inside the fort complex, but it was outside.
Okay. Interesting, because I only saw it when it was closed. I have to tell you one story about Old Vegas. When I was first at the museum, I started at the museum, creating the Aviation Museum in December of '93. But my office was always at the county museum, so I was always out there. It would have been '94 or '95. Somebody came into the museum one day, and I happened to be out at the front desk. And this guy came in and he said, I was driving down Boulder Highway, and this was before the freeway, and he said, I went past that fort up there, and I got a cold shiver down my spine. I was wondering, was there ever like a massacre up there or something? and the gal we had working the front desk kind of looked at me, and I looked at him and I said, only of the investors. And he looked at me, I said, that's just a made-up place. It's just a joke, guy. And he looked at me, and he looked at her, and he turned around and walked out real fast.
Almost amusement park.
So it looked pretty good.
Yeah.
It did look good.
And they did allow the museum to come in after they were closed, just before they tore the place down, and let us take any artifacts that we wanted, because they had some real stuff in there.
Oh, yeah.
They had one of the original buildings from the Dunes golf course out there. They had Markov's engine out there. His train engine was out there. Had a number of things out there, some of which got removed. Markov's train engine obviously did, but a lot of stuff didn't. It just got bulldozed. But it was interesting. So anybody else, were you there during its heyday when it was actually open?
Yeah. I was there, we remember the gunfights and everything. We thought it was the coolest thing in the world, but I think just the weather just was too hot to go there, and so they weren't making any money. But I know when they closed that Phil Roybal called me up and he says, Father Cavilla wants to see you. He's got something for your auction. And I'm like, oh, cool. So I go up there and he has cases and cases and cases of booze, and he says he thought you could use this for your auction and stuff and everything. I'm like, yeah, for sure, man. We're good to go. And so I started loading it up and I went over and I started grabbing the wine. He goes, no, the wine stays. I took the hard stuff, but Father kept that wine, so.
Fun? Anybody else? Had you ever gone out there?
It was a fun, nice place. There just wasn't enough businesses for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably a bit ahead of its time.
Well, yes, and that's why we have Wagon Wheel Street and that whole subdivision. They tried to sell that land for years because it had the casino overlay on it. And they could have, somebody could have bought it and built a casino there, but it was still way too far out. I can't tell you how many people have decided that the county museum used to be Old Vegas. It's like, no. We predate that.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, that was one of those that I remember the building, but unfortunately never saw it in its heyday. So, and Chris, did you ever go out there?
I did, and it was, even when I was in high school, it just seemed kind of like a weird place. It wasn't quite sure what it wanted to be, and like I said, I'm 15 years old and going, this place is gonna go broke. No one comes here, it's weird. I don't know what they were thinking. It just, it was like somebody didn't have enough money to do what they honestly wanted to do with it, and it just never went anywhere. I didn't think it was open as even long as it was.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's see. What do we have next here? Well, in comparison to Old Vegas, if we want to talk about something that wasn't open very long, how about the Las Vegas Downs?
How long was that?
You want to give a short rundown?
You know what, if we could, Kirby, are you up for talking about Las Vegas Downs? You've got the most firsthand.
We just need a quick rundown.
Well, it opened for greyhound racing, and Racetrack Road, that's basically why it's called Racetrack Road. That's where Las Vegas Downs was, right there on Boulder Highway. But it opened for greyhound racing in January '81. It was intended to add horse racing in its second year, but it ended up closing the next year. The dog racing bill had overwhelmingly passed the state assembly and the Senate in April 1973 to allow dog racing in Henderson, helped by former Henderson residents Governor Michael Callahan and Lieutenant Governor Harry Reid. The revised bill passed the Senate in April 1975. Let me see here. That's kind of all I have about it. One kind of side note that I found that is just the Nevada State Legislature actually outlawed dog racing altogether in 1997. So there's no chance of any dog tracks coming back to Nevada. In fact, there's only a couple dog tracks even really in the country. I think the only states that have active tracks as of now are Alabama, Arkansas, Iowa, Texas, and West Virginia. And I read the tracks in Arkansas and Iowa are likely to be closed by the end of next year. So I think that would leave West Virginia with like the only dog racing tracks left in the entire country at this point.
To start out with, it was never intended to be a dog racing place. It was horses. And one of the things that stopped it quite quickly was the heat, and there was no cooperation whatsoever from the Strip. I know that for a fact, that the investors in Las Vegas Downs wanted to do horse racing, and they had planned at one time to actually have buses and caravans coming from the Strip to be able to go out and see these horse races. At one point, they were going to have a dinner house where you could have a nice dinner, not just a hamburger, but a nice dinner with tablecloths and the whole bit, and watch these horse races. And the Strip just put a kabak on it immediately. They didn't want any part of it. So, of course, that hurt. The heat with the horses, that hurt. So then they kept trying one more time with the dogs, and it went downhill from there. The whole idea was great to start with. There just wasn't enough support.
The other thing I recall about is I lived in Highland Hills at the time. That's 79 to 83. And I was in construction then, and we'd go down to Laughlin and do the power plant overhauls at Mojave Generating Station. And I remember one night we'd carpool, and I remember one night we came back, I topped Railroad Pass, and I'm going, where did all this traffic come from? The line of cars going down Boulder Highway all the way into Vegas, and they was turning there on racetrack. And it was a bottleneck. It wasn't long after that, that's how that traffic light got put there, and there was nothing around it. But they had to put a traffic light there. And, but that was, I couldn't imagine. It's like watching Field of Dreams. All them cars coming up to the baseball field. I could not believe the traffic, but I never went to it or anything myself.
You know, like I said, it opened in January of 1981, but it actually was in the works since the late 60s. That's how long it took to put together, essentially.
Yeah, when you have to change state law, it does take a little while. Sort of like Lake Adair. It took a lot of years, or Lake Las Vegas today. But yeah, and the Downs, it's not just racetrack. There's a whole subdivision with horsey names and dog names, you know, Palomino, all of that are all based on the Downs being in there. They had plans, if you go back and look at this in the newspapers at the time, they had some huge plans for that site. They were going to do the supper club, but they were also going to do condos out there. They were going to do high-end housing out there. They were going to be doing a real build-out of the site. But even with the dogs, they couldn't get any races that weren't in the summer. Doing races with animals at 115 degrees is a bad idea.
Exactly.
You know, so yeah, that's one of those that just wasn't one that worked here. But now, one that was around for many, many years and was a huge part of the area. How about the Swanky Club?
When I was in high school, we would go to the Swanky Club
Use the microphone.
for after football games. They'd have dinners at the Swanky Club for the football players and things like that and everything. And of course, they had wedding receptions there, which we took advantage of in 1971, Judy and I got married at and our reception was at the Swanky Club. So we had to take different cars from that little Baptist church right downtown on Atlantic there. My brother-in-law was part of the police department, and when her and I walked out to go down to the Swanky Club, a police car pulled up and threw me in the car and took off. And I had to meet her at the Swanky Club, so they thought that was pretty funny. She didn't think it was too funny, though. But that's where our wedding reception was at the Swanky Club and everything.
The only two places this side of Fremont, coming out Boulder Highway, was the Green Shack, which was down by the old Showboat, and the Swanky Club. The Swanky Club was owned by the Mallory family. They ran it beautifully. The whole family worked there. They had wonderful food. They were friendly. Everybody in town went to the Swanky Club. And it became so popular that it was taking business away from the old Green Shack. I don't know if anybody remembers the Green Shack. It used to be out by the old Showboat on Boulder Highway. And it was one of the first nice dinner houses in town. All the celebrities went there because they felt like they were leaving the Strip and going to this little hideaway, and have dinner. And then it kind of got into the Swanky Club. But the Swanky Club went more for families. They had big family gatherings and home-cooked food, and it was wonderful for Henderson. Everybody went to the Swanky Club. And the Mallory family just finally fizzled down to where they were getting too old, and one thing led to another, and it had to close. That's where Dandy's and Nick's came in and took over what business Henderson was giving to the Swanky Club. But all the years it was there, it was wonderful. It had a good reputation. It had good food. They were good people. It was a nice place to go.
It was.
I had the pleasure of working at the Swanky Club. I was by the way, my stepdad was a infamous Henderson bartender for 30 years, and that's how I always had these underage bar jobs. But I worked there as a dishwasher and a busboy, and it was, it was hard work. And one of the things I remember, it was so dark in there, you almost needed a flashlight to eat your dinner. And they had a buffet, but they called it a smorgasbord, not a buffet. And their signature item was they made this homemade loaf of bread. And everybody would come from the bread, and I remember the bread would cook fresh like twice a day, and that seemed to be what everybody was after at the time.
One candle on every table, and that was it.
I remember you'd go from the kitchen, then out to the floor, to the kitchen, to the floor, and the lights, and we'd walk in the restaurant, I'd have to feel my way through it for a little while to figure out where I was going. But it was kind of a classic Americana, bean salad, loaf of bread, burger or Salisbury steak type of a place.
Good homemade gravy.
Salad bar?
What's that?
Didn't they have a salad bar?
Yes. They had a salad bar was part of the deal.
Yeah.
It's the stuff you don't see anymore. It's like salad bar with radishes and celery. Enjoy it.
Well, I remember going in there and like he said, before the word buffet came into Southern Nevada vocabulary, everything was known as a smorgasbord. Mallory Supper Club on Nellis Boulevard, that was a smorgasbord. The Swanky, that was smorgasbord. And all the hotels in Vegas, the old ones, when they advertised, they didn't say buffet, they said smorgasbord. And I remember a buddy of mine, Lenny Scrivener, John knows him. Lenny Scrivener and I went in there one night and cleaned them out of barbecued ribs. I mean, we wiped them clear out. It was a great place. The food was wonderful.
Yeah, it was.
I only have vague memories of it as a kid, but yeah, that sign on the top of the roof that said smorgasbord was, I remember like that's how I learned that word was from, I asked my parents, what does that mean? I think they told me it was, German for all you can eat, or basically. And just as kind of some nuts and bolts info about it, it was at 920 North Boulder Highway, so kind of around where the Hyundai dealership on Boulder Highway is. It was there. It opened in 1947, it closed in 1984. I found an article in the Henderson Home News from January 1977 that said that the time the co-owners Ben, Jack, and Alan Seidemann were going to begin a $1 million expansion, and they were changing the name from the Swanky Club to Swanky's Restaurant and Casino. It said the club was going to triple in size. It was going to have a 20,000 square foot casino. I'm not sure if all that actually got built or not. I didn't think it did. So yeah, so they had these big expansion plans in '77, and the place was closed by '84.
Okay. How about, since we're on the subject, Dante's and Nick's Supper Club?
Holy cow. Of all the places I had in those teenage years, hands down the most colorful place is Nick's Supper Club. I worked there for 2 years, my freshman and sophomore year. My stepdad was bartending there at the same time, and there was actually an apartment on top of Nick's. And when he first came into our lives, he lived in Nick's. So one thing, what strikes me right off the bat when I think of Nick's is hard work. I mean, Nick was very squared away, but he was a tough guy, and he was a slave driver. And if somebody got mouthy with him, it's like, well, you're fired, but we're going to fight first, and then when we're done fighting, you're fired. I mean, he was a hard guy, but the food was fantastic. And if there was one benefit, it was probably the only benefit of working there, is you got to eat there. And they fed you with the same food that they served in the restaurant, which was outstanding. I was talking to a guy I know, a Las Vegas icon, KJ Howe. And KJ Howe was the number 2 man at the Mint for most of the 70s and part of the 80s. And he said when they had like a high roller come into town to the Mint, and that guy, what he really wanted was a great meal, they would get a limo and send him from the Mint to Nick's Supper Club in Henderson, because Las Vegas was not known so much for good restaurants at the time. I asked him about that. I said, wasn't there anything downtown? He's like, yeah, there were some steakhouses. They were okay. They're just okay. But if they really wanted to hook somebody up, they'd take him to Nick's. So I bet anybody in here who's done any amount of drinking in their life has been in Nick's. Oh, yeah. And I used to see, I could see the world from a sober point, because all my teachers would come in there from school, and I'd stick my head out there and be like, there he is. I got a little soap on him now. But the weekends were just packed every Saturday. There was always bands playing. There was really nothing else. There was nothing else like it in Henderson. No. So it was a place to be, and my Aunt Maddie, Sean's mom, was cocktails there, and my stepdad was bartender, and one of the guys I did dishes with was named Evan, and Evan was Nick's nephew. And Evan's dad also worked there. He was from Greece, and he didn't speak English, and he was Gus. So the three of us would work together, and then later on, Evan went to open Evan's restaurant in Boulder City. So I hadn't seen him in about 25 years, and I walked in the door, saw him, recognized each other immediately. Hey, what's going on? So it was tough work, but it was an interesting place.
Evan's Old Town.
Yes, which I guess shut its doors right before COVID.
Yeah, he retired.
Yeah.
I was there through all of that. Do we want to go to Dandy's first or straight to Nick's?
Sure.
On the corner of Pacific and Lake Mead and Water Street, there used to be a what's it called?
Texaco Station.
Frost Top. A Frost Top. And Dan Furs and Dante Bagney owned that little Frost Top. At the time, my husband was working at Titanium. I had 3 little kids, and they went on strike. Anyway, I went to work at this little Frost Top. And Dan Furs had been in and out of both the service and in fine restaurants as a cook. And he wasn't real happy with just flipping those burgers. Between the two of them, they decided they wanted to build a supper club. So the two of them got a third party involved. His name was Captain Frank Jansen. And him and Ruth had a lot of money, and they retired, moved to Boulder City, and wanted to do something with their money. So Frank and Ruth, Dan Furs and Dandy Bagney, went in partnerships and built Dandy's. And when they first opened up, there was just 3 things on the menu. They were all top notch. They had steak, baked chicken, and lobster. So the menu was short, but everything was just superb. Everything they put into their cooking was the very best. Anyway, long story short, I moved from this little drive-in to work for them when Dandy's opened. And I worked there for Carolyn Evans, and I don't know if anybody remembers Blackie Evans. He was working at Titanium with my husband at that time, ended up being the AFL union representative for the state of Nevada, but at the time, we needed the money. So as soon as I found out, Carolyn worked a few days before I did, and as soon as I found out she made $15 one night, I said, I gotta get out of this drive-in. So I went to work over there, and it was just exactly like you're talking about, except at that time, Dandy's was a little bit different than the way Nick ran it, from the standpoint that it was calm and quiet. We had lovely music on all the time. There was never any yelling or any going on, and it was wonderful. And we had all the dignitaries, every doctor and every school teacher and every pit boss in Las Vegas came. I remember waiting on Dean Martin. It was a big deal. Then they all got older and sicker and decided they didn't want in. Well, when Nick come in, he come in like a fireball. I mean, I remember one time I went to pick up my order, and he said, pick it up, and I'm standing here with my hands full, I'm trying to pick it up, and he said, gee, I said, pick it up. And I looked at him and I said, are you talking to me? I'd never had anybody talk to me like that in my life. And he said, whatever, just do it and get the hell out of here. But he was mean. Yeah. But he ran a tight ship. I mean, you were there on time, you did your job, you kept your mouth shut, you did what he told you. But if you weren't going to take his, excuse my word, crap, he gave you a whole lot of respect. And he treated his customers wonderful. If they wanted frog legs on a night that we're not having them, he'd make damn sure you got them one way or another. And he did a lot for the city. He always put money into anything that's going on for the town. If they're having a program, if they're having a raffle for something that was good for the city, Nick was in. He was always in. But you're right, and it was a great place to go. It was nice, the food was good. But working there, you minded your business.
It was a place to go to on the weekend for dancing and stuff like that. And I remember one time sitting there and we're all dancing, everybody's having a great time, and for some reason Nick got in an argument with some guy at a table. And he told him to get out and use different language and that and everything. And the guy gave him a hard time, and he took off running to the back. And somebody said, oh, he's going to go get his gun. And this guy's like, he just jumps up and takes off, and everything. But I remember I got a call at the boys club once, and they said, Nick's on the phone. I go, Nick? They go, yeah, Nick's Supper Club. And okay, so I get on the phone. He goes, come down right now. Come down, And I said, okay, all right. So I went down there, and he says, my chef has community service. And he had the paperwork, And he says, he can't do it. You got to take care of it. I said, Nick, I go, community service and everything. He reaches in his pocket and he flips out a $100 bill. He goes, will that do it? Will that do it? I go, Nick, I can get in trouble for this. Flips out another one. Will that do it? Will that do it? And I go, Nick, $300. And I'm like, okay. So we made a $300 donation to the to the club for that. But I wasn't going to win the argument with him, and everything. So, but he needed that chef there at that time and everything. So, but every time I went in afterwards for the auction, man, he'd give me dinner for 4 or whatever I needed and everything. But he was short and gruff and just do it, kind of guy and everything. But great place to party.
He was
and
also
great
very
place.
generous.
He was,
generous
yeah.
to his help and to the city. He was always there with a handout.
Yeah.
Yes. So as Chris said earlier, so my mom, for those of you who went to Nick's back in the day, my mom was Maddie. She worked there for many years.
And Matthew and I worked together
Yep.
real well.
Yeah, so I can't tell you how many hours of my youth either eating at Nick's, just hanging out at Nick's. There was a Pac-Man machine up by the entrance of Nick's at one point in time. I can't tell you how many hours I probably spent just
Did you
playing
run around
Pac-Man
the
in there.
place?
But the main area of Nick's was the main restaurant, but then if you went in the back, there was a full bar back there and with booths and tables, and then there was a dance floor and then like a bandstand back there. And, like Clyde said, on weekends, that place used to rock. And my mom, on an almost nightly basis, would come home and, the next morning, she would proceed to tell me of all the hijinks that took place at Nick's the night before. And if things would get out of hand, which they would on a somewhat regular basis anyway, in the back room when people would start, getting liquored up and such, and, fights would start and here and there. And Nick would just come out, and if things were just kind of out of hand, Nick would just bring out his gun and just shoot a hole right into the roof of his own place and just bring things to a standstill.
He had that gun that was like a wallet. And it looked just like a wallet, except it had the trigger pull on it. And every now and then, who does that in a public place? And they're getting a little out of hand, and he reaches for his wallet, and everybody thinks, okay, this fight's over. Oh, no, it's just starting. We're just starting now.
It's the only place you might get shot for a poor performance. And, when I was in the police academy, people said, wow, the academy must be hard. And I was like, I worked at Nick's for 2 years. It's a piece of cake.
Well, and speaking of police, back in the day, a lot of the stories my mom used to tell me often involved Henderson police officers off duty. And I'm not going to name any names, but I used to be a reporter and cover the city of Henderson in the 90s. And at that point in time, one of those former officers became the chief of police. And I went into his office to go do an interview with him when he first became chief. And he didn't really know who I was at the time. I was just, another reporter coming in. And I came in and I said, hey, before we get started, I just want you to know that my mom is Maddie and used to work at Nick's, and I heard quite a few stories about you growing up, and he just gave me a look and just knew that I had the goods on him, and that kind of set the tone for our interview. He was in a totally different mindset in the interview after that once I... And that was also the point in time that you could actually, if you were getting ready to leave, because I remember seeing my stepdad do it quite often, it'd be like, hey, I'll have another drink. Let me get that one in a Go cup. And you would get it in a plastic cup, and you would go out to jump in your car with your, gin and tonic or whatever you had and drive home.
Life has changed a bit, thankfully.
Well, I haven't gone there a lot till about 79, and once I got a taste of that food, I was there twice a week. I couldn't, you could go in at that time and get 1.5 pounds of the colossal king crab legs for $11.95.
Yep.
And all his meals that he had came with soup and salad, not either or.
And garlic bread.
And he had the best soups. Oh, man, that guy was the bomb. I mean, he was great. And then we go back in the bar there, and Fred Gerard, Fred Gerard have his little band in there playing. And then And I'd go back in that bar, I'd see half my high school teachers in there. And the other half was the police department was in there. They all hung out there. And city fathers, and oh, yeah. And,
You know, one thing I think needs to be said about Nick, though, I was there many times when I remember one in particular, a family that had come in there regularly had the father pass away. And everybody was concerned. He was just somebody we knew, not well. We weren't all friends, but he was a customer. And Nick called us girls in the back and he said, I'm going to pack up baskets of food to take over to their house. And I remember somebody saying, well, who's going to pay for that? And I remember clearly Nick saying, the food's already here. All I have to do is cook, and I want to donate it, and you're responsible for taking it over there and telling them it came from Nick's. And later I thought, now that's pretty wonderful. He had that food, but that was the food he could have made a lot of money on too. And he sent big baskets like this of food. Maddie may have been one of us. There was 3 of us girls in the van, and we took that food over there and just set it down. So he did a lot of good things also, besides being mean.
well, I remember one night I was in there and they had a little impromptu deal with the band, and I looked over, and it was my former band teacher, Richard Geider.
Oh, Mr.
Mr. Geider, yeah. He was over there, he played a trumpet, and those guys would sit down and just have a little impromptu thing. It was great. That was a great place to go.
You know, because Chris talked about, you know, people even going from Las Vegas to come to Nick's to eat because just the food was that good. It was as good as anything you would get anywhere in Las Vegas, if not better. And one of the stories I heard, and maybe Otter Ray can confirm this for me or not, that I heard that I don't know if it's true, but I'll tell the story anyways. In 1980, they filmed a few scenes from Smokey and the Bandit 2 at St. Peter's Church in Henderson. And I heard that afterward, that all the crew, the film crew, that they all went from there to Nick's to go have dinner.
Sally Fields and what's his
Burt
name?
Lancaster.
Yep.
So that is-
That's true.
Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds, yeah.
Interesting, okay. Next thing on the list, the Jnk Pharmacy.
I've bought a lot of Black Hills Gold in that place for my wife over the years. Jack and Karen Elliott were super great people. And later on, they started a Jnk 2 that's now 7-Eleven on Horizon and Pacific up in Highland Hills.
Only drugstore I ever heard of that sold jewelry and whiskey.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, we used to go down to the Quickie and party a lot with Jack and Karen and the Carducci's and everybody else. And one time, we all jumped in a motorhome and we went down to they had a US Festival down in Glen Helen Park in California, at the bottom of Cajon Pass. Well, a couple weeks later, they had a country US Festival. So we all piled in that motorhome, went down there for 3 days. And that's when we saw Emmylou Harris and all them country stars, great. But they were fun people to party with. And Jnk Pharmacy, get our prescriptions there, do Christmas shopping there. I mean, they had everything.
They also had an arcade that, when my class of 82 brethren out there, when we were in 80, we would go, they had an arcade that opened up right next to it and was actually by the same owners. So we would go there and, remember, it was an after-school hangout for a lot of junior high kids.
Cool. Yeah, I remember that.
You know, I don't know if anybody could speak to this, but it doesn't involve J&K as a place specifically, but one of the childhood memories I have of that place, and we went there often because, like I said, they sold everything. I bought record albums there as a kid, candy, whatever. But almost daily, and I don't know who remembers this, there was a blind man who used to kind of walk back and forth, just kind of in front of
Always
J&K, and I always kind of wondered what his story was. And he was super nice. If you talked to him, he was very friendly and very outgoing, but I never knew anything about him, so if anybody,
We'll bring it up at the end.
yeah, Q&A time or whatever, if anybody knows anything about that, I'd love to know who that guy was.
You can ask questions from the front as well, okay. But let's get through the last one then. And this is one that I remember. By the way, I did make it to Nick's Supper Club once after I got here. And the last one is one that I, in fact, remember after I got here and have heard about many times, and I'm sure everybody in the audience has heard about, and that's the Henderson Cloud.
The Henderson Cloud.
So, any stories about the Henderson Cloud?
I got a good one.
Okay. Grab the mic.
When I first got here, it was probably my second year here. The Henderson Cloud was going on and everything, and so I thought I was a big environmentalist type of person, and everything. And I had a '55 Buick, and they had stickers that said Henderson stinks, and about the cloud, So I put that on the back of my car. It lasted for 2 days because I had so many threats from everybody in Henderson because I had that on my car and everything. It came off quick. But yeah, that cloud was something else. But I learned that you don't do that in Henderson if you live in Henderson, So, but it was pretty interesting, the comments I got from people with that sticker. So, but you just learn to live with it.
The only thing I know about it is you always heard about it on the news. The news would always bring up about Henderson's Cloud,
Henderson's Cloud.
Yeah.
Well, when I was in junior high on Van Wagen at Burkholder, and you're only, a quarter mile away from Black Mountain, there were days from the school you couldn't see the mountain at all.
Yeah.
And it was just white back there. And I used to walk right in front of the plants because I lived on Laswell in the Triangle, and I'd have to walk over to
Triangle,
Burkholder. So I would
yeah.
walk right in front of the plants where it's now Target and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I've probably inhaled as much cubic feet of cloud as anybody, but still here
Yeah,
now.
In junior high, like Chris said, at Burkholder, in PE class, they would, once a week or whatever, we'd have to run this course. I can't remember how long it was, a mile, 2 miles, whatever it was. We'd have to run it regularly. And there were some weeks where it was like, all right, we're not running today because the air's too bad outside from the Henderson Cloud. Now, of course, there were plenty other days where, hey, guess what, you're still running and it suck it up. And literally we're sucking it up. God knows what we were inhaling at times.
Well, when I lived in Carver Park, we were out in the desert, like I said, but they had them settling ponds out below Carver Park. And God only knows what was in them. And well, I used to wade through them chest high with a BB gun. No wonder I don't glow in the dark. I was like 10, 11.
All right, well, I think we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. That's the end of my list here, the list I was given, so. Does anybody have any further questions that you'd like to ask our panelists?
Or comments.
Or comments? Yeah.
These questions are in relationship to the Rainbow Theater. Does anyone recall how many seats roughly were in the theater?
Maybe 25.
Okay. And where was the projector in relation, I'm so sorry.
So hold on, does that agree with what you remember of the Rainbow Theater, that it was about 25 seats?
No, there
I'd
was
say it's a little more than that. I think maybe 50.
50, yeah.
about 50, I
I'm
would say.
thinking more 50.
Could anyone share whether or not it did have, in fact, a concession stand?
It did, yes.
Okay. And what was the orientation, if you could, once you came up the steps that came from the front of, corner of Market and Army, when you came up the steps, the ticket theater, or the ticket window, which, by the way, is still there, and I shared a photo of that with Val today. Where was the concession stand? Where was the actual theater and the projection room, if anyone can recall?
Well, the tickets and the concession were one and the same, and there was one employee that had all of that. So they had a little glass booth right there with the candy and stuff like that, and you also bought your ticket from that person. And they would sell strange things there. It's like, you can have some Milk Duds, or would you like some shirts? We were selling shirts today. It was, like I said, it was very makeshift. But, so the screen would have been where the outside door still is, because when you looked at the screen, the door to go outside into the outside fire escape would have been to the left of the screen.
Right.
Okay. There's presently a small or like a workshop, and then there's an open air, and then it proceeds on to the roof. And I'm assuming that's the exit that you were speaking of.
Yeah, it's up on the second story.
And scary stairs. Very, very, still scary stairs coming down off the top there. When did that actually close?
I don't know. I think we went to it when we were still in high school, so probably not much more after that. So I would say it would probably closed in the mid 83-ish, 84-ish, somewhere in there.
So it was in operation after the pepper mill began service, or began the pepper mill in 1967?
I don't-
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I really do appreciate that.
Through the Time Warp.
Okay. Any other questions about any of the sites that we talked about?
You want to add anything about Las Vegas Deli?
Anyone else? Yeah. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. And did anybody have any memories about the blind fellow in front of the Jnk?
About the blind
You
guy
do?
in front of Jnk.
His last name was Robinson.
His last name was Robinson.
Somebody said that, I don't know if I should say this.
Yeah.
That he tried to commit suicide and blew.
That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
His son was Paul Robinson. He used to be the manager of the old Market Town food store. Do you remember where Market Town was? And they had a playground on the side of the building where people would go in shopping, and they'd turn their kids loose in that playground. Had swings and teeter-totters and all that stuff. And then, and their daughter Gwen, I went to school with her. That was her dad that did that. I mean, and then for years and years, he always came up Atlantic Street every day, and he would come down, and he'd sit on that little window ledge in front of Jnk. And he would stay there for a while, and then he'd get up and walk back. But he was blind. It took the whole front of his face off.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Hang on just a moment. Let's get the microphone to you.
I was just curious if anybody else attended the Carver Park School when they were like in elementary school, because that's where I started school, and I was like in first grade. You did? Okay. Well, more than...
Well, we've got a few people.
Yeah, because when I first came here, I came from Las Vegas, New Mexico, and so my primary language was Spanish. So when I started school there, they forced you to speak English, and I didn't know English. So if you did not speak in English, they put you in the corner with the dunce hat on. And I never forgot that. Of course, you know, from then on, they said, do not speak Spanish, you have to speak English. So you couldn't even go to the bathroom and raise your hand like most kids. You had to say, can you go to, the restroom in English. So it was like super painful when I was really little. Yes, I did.
Any other questions? Okay, any other comments from?
I have one.
Okay, hang on just a moment.
I would just like to say this community has grown and is so large compared to what it was in the day that we're talking about. But it just makes me feel like, wouldn't it be nice if we could all leave here and try to be that kind of community again and start to really care about ourselves and each other and be a community. You don't know your neighbors anymore. You don't feel like you're comfortable to go help anybody. And I don't know the answer. I don't know how we would do it, but wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if we could all just take a few minutes and say, gee, I would really like to know you. I would like to help you if you need something, and I would like to know that you got my back.
All I know is back in those days, you were on first name basis with all the police officers, all the firemen. Everybody knew everybody in the
We all got to
town.
go back to Nick's.
It was a great town.
Well, if the building existed. Yep.
I just talking about a small town and everything. When I first started at the Boys Club, Judge Tabney, everybody remembers Judge Tabney, he was my board president, and I asked him, Judge, why don't you go out with me and help me get donations, And what better way to get a donation? Hi, my name's Clyde Caldwell, I'm executive director. This is Judge Tabney. How would you like to help us out with our auction? And man, we would pull in so much stuff on a day's work. And on the way home one time, he goes, wait, we got one more stop. I said, sure, Judge, whatever you want to do here and everything. So we stopped at this jewelry store, and he comes out, and he opens up this case. It's got this beautiful diamond and gold bracelet. I mean, it's about $2,000 worth and everything. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. This is like in '81. And so we left, and I was telling the judge, thanks, Judge, I think that's great and everything. Next morning at 9 o'clock, I get a call from Judge Dabney. He goes, you be in my office right now. And I said, okay. So I went down there. He goes, now, if the FBI contacts you, you make sure that you tell them that was for the auction. I go, well, it is, And I go, I'm going to tell the truth, right? And he goes, yeah, tell the truth to the FBI. And I said, God, are they going to call me or what? And he goes, no, but if they do. And I said, well, what's going on? Well, come to find out, the jewelry store he went to was Tony Spilatro's. Yeah, and the FBI had it under surveillance, And man, I'll tell you what, that was scary. But they never called. But we sold the bracelet. And then the other thing is funny about the club is when I first started there, financially the club was just about closed, right? And in '73 when George Foreman beat Frazier, Foreman gave Mike O'Callahan, Governor O'Callahan at that time, his championship belt buckle. And it had this beautiful gold eagle, gigantically gold eagle with a red ruby eye and silver inlay and everything. It was just beautiful and everything. And so I went to the board of directors and I said, look, if we don't get some money in here, we're going to be closing our doors, And they go, what do you think we should do? And I said, let's sell that belt buckle, because Michael Callahan did. He gave it to the Boys Club, for a donation. And so John Marciano at the time knew some people in Vegas and everything at the sports book and everything, and they put out pictures of this gold belt buckle. And he goes, well, the board asked me, how much you want for it? How much you want for it? I go, I need $30,000. And so they go, well, if you can get 30 grand, yeah, let's sell it. And so I was getting phone calls saying, hey, I'll give you $5,000. It's not worth much more than that and everything. I go, nope, I need $30,000. And so I got a call from a guy in Arizona. He goes, He goes, you get me a letter of authenticity of that belt buckle, and I will buy it for $30,000. And so who did I have to go to? So I called up Michael Callahan, and I'm trying to explain. I'm kind of new at the club and everything. I'm trying to explain, look, Mike, we need to do this and everything. He goes, you be in my office tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And he slams the phone down. I'm like, oh, no, you know. So evidently he did some checking or something. I went into his office, and he says, hey, come on in, Clyde, have a seat and everything. He goes, here's your letter. I hope everything goes great. So I got this letter from him saying he got it from George Foreman and stuff, and I called the guy back up, and he says, okay, I'm coming in on this flight. He goes, in 2 or 3 days, I'm going to come in on this flight and everything. He goes, but I'm sending you a check and everything, so let it go through the bank. And he sent me $30,000, and I took the belt buckle out to the airport, and that's when they had those scanners. And it's going through the scanner, you know, and this guy's looking at the scanner, going back and forth. Wow, man, that's pretty cool, you know. So it was in a nice case, and so I remember at McCarran when they had the bars right outside whenever you got off the planes and everything, you know. So I'm holding the sign up, waiting for this guy. He gets off. We go into the bar. He looks at it. He shakes my hand. He goes, you got your money? I go, I got my money. He goes, okay, see you later, and took the belt and took off. From that time on, the club has stayed open. So, pretty interesting story, though. Sold George Foreman's championship belt buckle to keep the club open.
All righty, well, thank you. We're not quite done yet.
All right, thanks to Sandra Burns and Tim Brooks. They've donated 2 gift certificates, one for Emerald Isle and one for the Rainbow for dinner for 2. And we had everybody sign their name, so.
Let's see who wins.
Did you?
Sure. I didn't put my name in there.
You didn't.
No, I did that on purpose. You should have somebody who's not in there drawing. Okay, Jeannie Potter? There's Jeannie.
There she is.
Ah, very good. You won, what did she win?
Rainbow.
Ah, a gift certificate, dinner for 2 for the Triple B Burgers at the Rainbow Club. Oh, Sean, you want to take that up to her?
And the other one's for the Emerald Isle.
Okay,
Oh, right over there.
right up there.
In the middle.
Ah, Jack Clark. Where are you, Jack? There you are. All right. And you got a dinner for 2 at Emerald Isle. Congratulations. All righty, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you to our wonderful panel. You guys did a great job. Please put
That was a good time.
January 19th on your calendar. That's going to be our next one. And that's going to be a celebration of Henderson mayors. We'll see you back then.
You ever heard anything of Larry Griffin?